In this video we will draw all the walls, starting with the external walls. In AutoCAD, the first thing to do is create a new layer. We'll call the layer Walls with your initials at the start. Make sure the layer is not locked. The color should be green, and the line weight in this case 0.35. Again, make sure the layer is current. Now we need to draw a polyline around the outline of the main part of the building, so start at the bottom left hand corner and work around in an anti-clockwise fashion like so. Zoom in if you need to and make sure that you accurately pick up the endpoints in each case, and then complete the polyline as such. Now we need to offset that line by 100mm 3 times so that we create the cavity. Make sure you offset out the way. And then we need to create another new layer and call it something with your initials at the start, and Walls Cavity. This time the color needs to be different. We can type the color in here in this case, so it is 252. It'll be a grey color, and the line weight in this case we don't want to be 0.35. Let's make it 0.18. Click OK. Don't make the layer current this time, just close down the layer properties manager. Now what we can do is go back and choose the internal two wall lines and move them over to the Walls Cavity layer. So you'll see they now have a different appearance. They're grey, but as well as that they will print out thinner lines. The two outer lines will print out thicker. For the rest of the external walls then, we need to draw another little polyline just at the top here around the outline of what is the utility room. And then we can offset that by 100, again 3 times. And those two internal lines again can be put onto the Walls Cavity layer. We need another line over on the right hand side here just to pick up the line for the boiler room, and we can offset that by 100. At this point then, the two sets of polylines we can select and explode. Make sure that your room layout layer is locked, otherwise those will be exploded as well, but because they're locked, in this case they're left alone. And then what we need to do at this point is probably hide that room layout layer just to allow us to fix the walls where they join. Like so. And then we can use the extend tool and trim out the lines like this. We should also draw that line here, and then we can use the fillet tool if we use a radius of 0. That will help us get the walls for the boiler and the utility room correct. And that should be the external walls more or less complete at this point. Next we will insert the internal walls. First of all, you need to turn back on the room layout layer, and then we can trace over these walls, making sure that when you're doing so, the walls layer is the current layer. So let's draw some normal polylines, and let's just trace them around like so for each of the rooms. This should be a relatively straightforward process. If you want to make sure that you've drawn those accurately, I suppose you could hide a layer and use your base drawing while you're doing that instead. If you just keep hitting return, that will repeat the command and allow you to keep drawing new lines. Do use lines rather than polylines. And really down here we drew an extra line that can be deleted, so let's delete that and move this line up. At this point we should be able to hide again that room layout layer, and then we'll be able to go around and use the trim tool just to trim out where those walls meet the external wall. In this case the construction is blockwork for internal walls as well as the outside wall, so it's fine to trim out those gaps or leave the gaps. That should be the internal walls now complete. As I said, a relatively straightforward process when you have the room's layout to follow. The next stage is to insert the openings in the external walls. At this stage you will need to refer to PDF file Plan 4. To add in the first structural opening we can offset a line. So let's do the front door first of all, offset by 440. Just follow the dimensions on your drawing and offset the next distance by 1022.5. Then we can use the trim tool to trim the wall out and trim those offset lines as well. You might need to repeat the command. Then we can offset by 100 millimeters, and this is to put the reveal in, or the jam detail, on both sides of the opening. And when you're trimming those off, the simple little rule to remember is that the inside leaf meets the outside leaf, and thus the outside leaf of the cavity continues through. And what you also need to do is take those little lines and put them on the wall's cavity layer. So that's the opening for the first door. Let's do the window beside it here. So the distance is 777.5 from this side in, and then the next distance 2260, and then again we can trim like so, and then we can offset by 100, and trim those lines again. As I said, always make sure that the outside leaf carries through and that the inside leaf meets the outside leaf. Those lines again need to be on the wall's cavity layer. If you're feeling a bit more confident and you want to have a run of openings in one go, you can offset a number of distances along. So the next distance is 4172.5. Returning to repeat the command there, 552.5, and then the window is 685, And then because those dimensions are actually the same, what we can do is copy those lines to speed the process up, like so. And then we can take a check measurement on the end, and that distance is 2.5 like it should be. So then we can trim those lines that we've offset. We don't need the extra parts. And then we can trim the openings in between. And again, then we can offset for each of the jam details. And we can use the trim tool again. Trimming off each of those lines as we need. Ensuring that in each case the inside leaf meets the outside leaf. And then we also need to make sure all those lines are put onto the wall's cavity layer. So that's the principle of doing the openings for the external wall. And if you continue round, adding all the rest of them in the same way. Once all your structural openings are in the external wall, your drawing should look like this. The last section in this video is the internal wall openings. Adding the internal openings is similar to adding the external openings, but it's a little bit easier because generally you only have one wall thickness to deal with. So first of all, let's draw a line at the midpoint of this wall. This will be sliding doors between the dining room and the sunroom, and let's offset that half a distance either way. If you are trying to work out half of a distance up here, you can use the little calculator tool just to help you. And the distance is 1710 divided by 2, which is 855. So we can offset by 855 either direction, and then remove the little line in the middle, and then trim. For the cloakroom then, offset out a distance of 100. The reason for doing that is it's just good practice to keep the door out from an adjacent wall, so that the handle doesn't damage a wall or something behind there when it's opened. And offset a distance of 910 for all of these internal doors. And then we can use the trim tool to trim out those lines. Again, we'll show an example here about the WC. So offset by 100. And then by 910. This time we can use the stretch tool, stretch the end of those lines just up, and then use the trim tool again to trim off those lines. So you need to follow the same process through with all of the openings. Once all the openings are in your building, the drawing should look like this. Just double check that you have 100mm in behind each of the doors here and here for the WC. The gap at the outside for the dining room door here should be 100. The gap here should be 100, and the door through to the lounge actually lines up with the door into the dining room kitchen area. The door then between the utility room and the kitchen, this short distance here is 100, and make sure that you finish off the jamb on each side correctly with the lines on the right layers. So this is what the drawing should look like, and it's ready now to put in the doors and windows at the next stage.